I'm holding something small in my hand. Can you see it? Yeah, it's a bean. And if I were to put that in some soil and water it, what would happen? Right, a bean plant would grow. Now we can't see the bean plant, can we? Not yet anyway. But we know that in every bean there's the promise of a bean plant. That kind of makes me think of a story I heard once about a boy that had 5 beans and they grew into a giant beanstalk. Do you know the story I'm talking about? Right, Jack and the Beanstalk. Well, if you remember, Jack's mother threw those beans out the window because she thought they were worthless. And there's a story that's kind of like that in the Bible. One of the most important people in all the Bible was a man named Abram, who lived thousands of years before Jesus. You may know him better as Abraham, which is the name God gave him later. Well, one day God told Abram to leave the country he was living in and travel to a new country that God would show him. He said to Abram, "I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great." God was making a promise to Abram. It was kind of like a bean. Abram couldn't see the great nation and the blessings and the great name that God was promising to him. Just like we can't see the bean plant yet that's hidden inside this bean. But God was promising that those things were going to come true. Abram believed God's promise was true. He took that bean and he put it in his pocket, so to speak, and he went out to that new country that God said he would show Abram. When he got there, God appeared to him again and said, "I am going to give this land to you and your descendants." That means your children and your grandchildren. This was the second promise God made. The first bean that God gave him was hard to believe, but this second promise was even harder to believe. God was saying that he would give this land to Abram's children and grandchildren. But Abram and his wife were not able to have children. How was God going to fulfill this incredible promise? Abram didn't know, but he still believed God. He built an altar right there and he worshiped the Lord. Well, life went on for Abram. The years passed, God blessed him with cattle and wealth, but he still didn't own any of the land he was living in, and he still didn't have any children. He might have looked at those 2 beans and thought, you know what? I don't know if I can believe these. I'm just going to throw them out. But he didn't, and it's a good thing he didn't, because God spoke to Abram again. He said, "Lift up your head, Abram, look around. All the land you see is going to belong to you and your descendants. They will be as numerous as the dust." This was God's third promise, the third bean. And once again, Abram believed that what God said was true, even though he didn't see it yet. He obeyed God and he began to look around the land like God had told him to. Well, the years continued to pass. Abram got to be an older man. He started to think about the day of his death, and he started to prepare for it by making a will. Since he didn't have any children of his own, one of the servants in his household was going to be his heir and receive all the wealth that Abram had. But God appeared to Abram in a vision and said, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward will be very great." This was God's fourth promise, the fourth bean. And Abram took the bean, but he sighed when he did it. He said to God, "What good is a reward when someone who is my servant is going to receive it when I die?" And God said, "No, this man shall not be your heir, but one born of your own flesh. You will have your own child. Go outside and look at the stars. So shall your descendants be." Wow, that means they were going to be more numerous than the stars. I can't even count the stars, can you? This was the fifth promise from God. 5 seemingly impossible promises. But would Abram take them and believe them after so many years of waiting? Or would he throw them out as being worthless? Would he say, "I keep hearing you make promises, God, but they don't come true. I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of believing. No, he didn't. When Abram heard that fifth promise, the Bible says he believed God and God credited it to him as righteousness. Two very important things happened when Abram believed in those promises. First of all, his faith became the soil in which those 5 promises could be planted. And guess what happened? They all grew. They all came true. God did make Abram into a great nation. Abram did have children and grandchildren. He did receive all of the land that God had promised him. And the whole world was blessed through Abram's family because Jesus was born into that family. The second very important thing that happened when Abram believed was that God saw Abram as a righteous man, a man without sin. In other words, Abram was able, through his faith, to have a right relationship with God. This is a very important principle that the Bible goes over again and again. Do you know that God has big promises for you to believe? One of them is in John 3:16. Once you read it, ask yourself, can I believe this big promise that God is making to me?